My three kind of biggest careers are like 20 years as a stand-up comedian, 20 years as an advertising creative person, and then, last 10 years or 11 years as an entrepreneur, whatever. But I find that I never really wanted to hang out with comedians on a full-time basis, never really wanted to hang out with advertising people on a full-time basis. I just like the intersection of those worlds. And that's what I love the spot where I'm in now, just personally, where it's all these things coming together, as a writer with books, as a comedian with kind of on stage speaking. I certainly integrate humor, creativity from a creative point. My very first job was launching the first national executive MBA program through video conferencing. So it's like business school curriculum kind of coming in. So it was always about the curiosity.
Today, I have an incredible Canadian, and if you listen to my podcast, you know I love my Canadian friends up north across the border. And before I introduce you to Ron, make sure you comment, like, share, and subscribe to this podcast, because I know Ron is going to blow you away. So rather than me go on and on and on about how great Ron is, although I will tease him and let you know that he's the founder of a company called, riddle me this, Church and State. And as an American, that's sort of kind of taboo. We keep those things separate. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Ron Tite, and the founder of Church and State. So welcome, Ron.
Well, thanks, Dr. Patty Ann. That's very nice of you. And it's funny that we get often, every once in a while, we'll get from Southern West, and it's like, y'all a church. And we're like, no, we are not a church. So to explain the name for those who are the same response as you did, because we do get that sometimes, within the advertising world, historically, if I went to the Wall Street Journal and said, hey, I want an article about me, then the Wall Street Journal would say, no, we can't do that. That is the separation of church and state. That is the separation of advertising and editorial, and things don't come together. And we just saw the way the world was going from an advertising perspective of low cost of production and, instantaneous distribution, and that fundamentally changed the media game. And so, there was this, we started out with this fundamental belief that brands need to be media properties. And
hang on, time out. When you said you saw the way the world was going, flush that out. What do you mean? What was the time frame? What was going on in the world?
That's a great question. So it was 11 years ago. I was executive creative director at an international shop called Havas. And this was just as social media was coming in, digital was really kind of really gaining ground, and there was the kind of started to fulfill its promise. I was in Montevideo, Uruguay, shooting a TV spot for Kraft. And
Kraft, Kraft.
The fourth, yeah, it was for one of their cracker brands, kind of thing. And it was the fourth time I had been in South America that month shooting, because that's what we did from Canada. When you need a spring spot, you go to South America. And I just looked at my producer.
You guys went to Cabo.
No, it's cheaper to go to Argentina than it is. It's cheaper to go to Argentina than it is to go to Miami or somewhere in the U.S. So you would shoot a lot in Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. And so I was there, and I said, how are we still doing it? How are we still flying halfway around the world? This is crazy. Because three things fundamentally changed. And I was kind of starting to see this happening. One was the cost of production came down. So anybody could shoot anything, and anybody could record anything. You're doing essentially a radio show here, which in the past you needed a big booth and sound systems and stuff. So anybody can create anything. Not rocket science. Secondly, instantaneous distribution. I didn't need a TV network to distribute something that I created. So I had low cost of production, instantaneous distribution, and that created this desire for people to consume niche content. So more and more, that niche content became way more engaging when they're very specific interests. Now, what that did for brands was, if I'm Microsoft and I've got a team of researchers who have hundreds of case studies of our technology being applied in various industries, who has more credibility? Somebody who's doing that for Microsoft every single day, or a staff writer for the Wall Street Journal? Well, of course, the Microsoft person. So the only difference is they have this sales bias. And if they remove the sales bias, they have way more credibility to talk about that stuff. So we just saw
that. That's a big thing, though, Ron. That, like, when you asked who has more credibility, I was like, I really don't know. But that was because I was thinking of the sales bias. So I'm glad you addressed that.
Yeah, because what's great about journalists is they have no bias. They're incredibly factual. Supposedly they have integrity. Well, but we've seen this, right? What's interesting on the media side is they used to just be one. It was like the news was the news, a paper was the paper, and they could live in that world. Now, as soon as we started to have all this niche content develop, consumer eyes started to go elsewhere and away from mass media. And so now they start to lose advertising dollars. And what do? Well, they now start to go through this convergence. They start to buy baseball teams, and they're telephone companies, and they're just they're owned by other people. They have other interests, and now they got to drive interest in those other activities. They have to see a paper into a TV show, into a YouTube channel, into a TikTok account, into a baseball team. Now they got to start acting like a business and less about pure play media. And so the dynamic
started 11 years. So you're benchmarking this about 11 years ago. That's amazing, because
that's when I started the agency.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
It feels like it's been that way forever, and I'm not young, and neither are you.
No, I'm not that young.
Okay. All right. So you saw that opportunity that the world was changing. It was impacting advertising, marketing, and of course, all roads lead to the almighty dollar. Okay.
Yeah.
So in comes Ron, genius that he is, church and state. Give me the story of the name.
So, well, originally I was just like, well, we're just going to call it whatever. I don't know how to solve the problem. I didn't say I want to be an agency. I just said we need to solve this problem. That brands need to be media properties and media properties need to be brands. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I just want to solve that problem. I don't know if it's going to be a consultancy, an agency, a production. I have no idea. So it was about solving a problem in the marketplace. And then I said, we're calling it the Tite Group.
Tite.
Brilliant name.
Oh, Tite. I wonder.
Yes.
And so give us the story behind the name.
Well, so what's interesting, right? So I had that name. And because I was also simultaneously, I also wanted to control my own destiny as an entrepreneur, because I started to speak a ton. And it's like, it's tough to do that and have a boss. So I just need to control my own destiny. So we were Tite Group for a couple of years.
To me, this is Dr. Patty Ann's podcast, Genius Again. And I had to become an entrepreneur because I didn't want a boss telling me what to do. So yeah. I can feel you.
Yeah. So we're kindred spirits here. And so, but then something really interesting happening where I don't know if you know a guy named Neil Pasricha.
I don't.
Neil's a really
there's
good
a lot
friend.
I don't know. There's a lot I don't know.
Yeah, Neil's a lovely guy, super smart. Wrote a book called The Book of Awesome. The Happiness
I know that book. I know the title. Okay.
Yeah. So that's Neil. Neil and I are friends. And Neil, but then we know each other from the speaking world. We're going somewhere, and I said, just come by the office and we'll leave from here, when it was the Tite Group. And he showed up to the office and he walks in. There's 20 people working for me there. And Neil goes, what? It's a thing. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, well, the Tite Group, I thought it was just you. Like you in a basement. Because speakers, it's the Tite Group. Everyone has their name and the incorporated name, And he said, I think you're doing yourself a disservice in the speaking world, because your agency is bigger than just you. And there's nothing wrong with the individual entrepreneur, owner operator businesses, but it's a different thing.
Yeah,
and he said, I think
what you got. Flaunt what you got.
Yeah. And then he said, you're also, your agency is way more than you. So why you? And so I went to the group and I said to the team, and I said, we need a new name, and it's got to be not the Tite Group. It's got to be less tight, more group. And so then we came up with Church and State as kind of a fitting for strategically what we were doing.
But wait, I'm following you. But, maybe this is a U.S. thing, but when you throw church into the word church into business, it is all hell break, pun intended. Hell breaks loose, right?
Yeah.
So where did the church come from? Was it truth? Like, Really? I mean, you could have had apples in state. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Well, historically, the original phrase of church and state was literally the separation of church and state,
correct.
Of government and religion. And then advertising used that as almost a metaphor to describe the separation of editorial and advertising.
Oh, so that was like if you were in the field, I would know that.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to share my ignorance. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Because that was one of the concerns we had was like, are people going to get it? And my response was, those who get it are going to get it.
Oh, yeah.
The people who are deep in marketing, that's who we want to speak to. Right. So
it makes sense.
Yeah, so
it addresses your avatar.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
And so, and so those parallel worlds happen. And so speaking kind of continued and developed. So now I kind of really, I do about 70 speeches a year. I'm on the road a lot. I have a team of people at the agency. And we have I have both those parallel streams.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Have you gotten any pushback from the name, from the people that don't know?
Real people will say, like, I don't get it. But it's so interesting, right? The response is, there's a rule. I spent 20 years as a stand-up comedian. There's a rule in comedy that nobody gets offended anymore. They only get offended on behalf of other people. And
you know what we call that? You know what I call that?
What's that?
In trouble. A coward. Say what you mean. Speak for yourself.
Right.
Speak for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
I don't need someone to be offended for me as a woman. If I'm offended, I'll tell you.
Right.
I don't need you as a man to be offended for me. But
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we found that people were like, oh, like, it doesn't really bother me, but aren't you concerned? Kind of like, well, those in marketing, and we don't really care.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's like asking for a friend. No, you're not. You're asking for yourself.
Yeah.
All
That's right.
Okay. So that's a great name. All right. So that's the noise for people listening of me throwing my notes out the window, because you're way more your bio is really interesting, but you're so much more personable, way more interesting than anything in print. And since you're an extrovert, I'm going to have to really start to pull stuff out of you.
Right.
All right. You've worked in so many industries, right? Mm-hmm. What's been your favorite?
My favorite this is maybe a lame, lazy answer, but my favorite is the hybrid worlds when industries come together. Like my three kind of biggest careers are like, 20 years as a stand-up comedian, 20 years as an advertising creative person, and then, last 10 years or 11 years as an entrepreneur, whatever. But I find that, like, I never really wanted to hang out with comedians on a full-time basis, never really wanted to hang out with advertising people on a full-time basis. I just like the intersection of those worlds. And that's what I love the spot where I'm in now, just personally, where it's like, it's all these things coming together with, as a writer with books, as a comedian with kind of on stage speaking. I certainly integrate humor, creativity from a creative point. My very first job was launching the first national executive MBA program through video conferencing. So it's like business school curriculum kind of coming in. It's all those things weirdly. The only thing I don't really use, I can't go any further than this podcast.
It's just between us.
Don't say anything.
Just between us.
I did a phys ed degree.
You're a gym teacher?
I did a phys ed degree.
Let's do jumping jacks.
Yes. It's the only thing in my life that I don't really use. I did play tennis this morning.
Did you ever?
No, I've never used it.
I got to tell you a really funny story. I'm going to offend every gym teacher in the planet. So a friend of mine's son, who was a phenomenal athlete, like this kid was raised to be an athlete and a gym teacher. And that is in fact what he is today.
Yeah.
But he goes to college that will remain nameless on his sports scholarship, because this is what this kid does. Not a rocket scientist. He'll tell you that. His parents will tell you that.
Right.
Down to earth, and in the States, everybody's kid's going to be like a Yankee if you play baseball. Like it's out of control. It's all out of control today. So anyway, freshman year of college, he's taking like, he needed 1 credit. So he's taking basket weaving. Right. So he calls up his mom. He goes, Mom, I can't do this. This is just too hard. It's too much stress. And she said to him, son, you're taking basket weaving. The only class easier than that is if you go back to kindergarten. I don't mean to offend everybody. We all need to laugh. We know that a gym degree is not the same. I'm sorry, physical education is not
or whatever you call it. Yeah.
Neuroscience. Did you ever use it?
No, how I made the leap, because I was the only one in my family to go to university. I come from a very blue collar family, grew up very poor. That wasn't the thing, right? It wasn't like this expectation of like, you're going to go to high school, then you're going to like, it was. So I just went because I didn't know how else you got jobs. Like I didn't, and I wanted, so like, okay, I need to get out of the south end of the city that I grew up in. And it was like, I guess the only thing I knew was like teachers. That was the only professional job that I had exposure to. So I said, I want to do that. So I wrestled, and I said to my wrestling coach, what'd you do? And he said, I went to this school, I went to Queen's University, I did a phys ed degree. I was like, all right, I'll just do that.
Yeah.
And then I went, and it was obviously it changed the trajectory of my life, because then you go and you're like, oh, I can do anything.
Right.
And it was such a great lesson of like, oh, I don't need to do that. And again, there are people who do it and love it and are amazing at it.
Of course. But
I just like, I don't think I want to do that. I've other interests. And then, the author, John Irving?
Of course. The World According to Garp.
Garp, right?
Of course.
Okay. So I had a lot in common with John Irving, where John Irving was a wrestler. I was a wrestler. John Irving wrote a book, autobiography called a memoir that was called The Imaginary Girlfriend. Very few people have read it. Tiny book.
No, but I'm thinking about, I think it was the Notre Dame football player that had the imaginary girlfriend. And it was quite mean. It was very humiliating. I'm not sure what it was, but
yeah.
With the
John Irving.
Yeah, but back then, yeah.
Yeah, John Irving lives around the corner from me.
Okay.
He lives partly in Toronto and partly in the U.S.
Tell him his books are referenced all the time on Jeopardy. Not that I watch, I've been told.
Okay, yeah. So he wrote this book, and he told this story. The book is really about him making the switch from wrestling into writing. Okay. He was a wrestler in college, and he discovered this love of writing. And jocks didn't write. Like, there's no way. So he would say to his coach, I can't go to the meet. I can't go to practice because I'm going to see my girlfriend. But his girlfriend was his writing.
Got it.
And I thought, if that guy can make that leap and be this really serious competitive wrestler and then into writing, I can do that. And so it really opened up. Like, oh, I don't have to work in phys ed, and I can pursue a million different things. And so I really started down that road. And yeah, I started working in the business school of that university, and just have never. As a summer student in third year, I went into business school teaching executives about lifestyle management because I was this phys ed degree.
Right.
And then I was there. And after I graduated, the director of the program said, you're going to come work full time. You're going to run one of these programs. I said, oh, I'm not a bachelor of commerce. And he goes, only rocket science is rocket science. That's fine. He's like, you got the social skills. You're competitive. You know how to operate as a team, like all that stuff. So yeah, I just weirdly went off in a different direction.
So a couple of things. So I have 2 masters and a doctorate, but I call it this: BS, MS, more S, PhD, piled high and deep. Right?
Right.
But praise the Lord, Ron, because when you went to college, it actually did what college is supposed to do, which is it opened up your world. All right. But I do have to ask a little bit of a personal question. It's not as personal as I'd like it to be. It's not really juicy, but it is personal.
You can get juicy.
But it is personal. There must have, 2 things, actually. One is what I find very interesting is that, you use sports. And look, I love sports. I'm joking with you before. I absolutely love sports. I think everything, life is all about, sports is just about life. You win some, you lose some, and you don't always get the calls. Right? Yeah. Teaches you all those great things. But what I'm finding interesting is that as a wrestler, there's so, like, I look at human development, human behavior, human motivation as everything: psychological, emotional, physical, mental well-being, spiritual. So you used your foundation of the body because the mind and the body is connected now, right? Only recently have we talked about the separation of mind and body, like separation of church and state, right?
Yeah.
We learn so much from being connected to our body. And today's people are so disconnected from themselves. I really think it's fascinating. Like what you did really, perhaps unknowingly, but was brilliant nonetheless. And it was foreshadowing where you are today. It's really fascinating. Yeah. I could talk to you about this forever, but then your head would be too big because it really is.
But it was a weird confidence thing where I don't know where that came from. We're like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. Just as the confidence was, I'm going to try stand-up comedy, right? Like, boom.
Right, hang on, stop right there because I was going to go there. So here's where I really started and I distracted myself. There must have been something about you, though. And where did it come from way back when, where you were able to see, hey, I don't have to just do this. Even though this is the only thing I knew, you realized, oh, there's more to the world. And what most people do is they see that and it's like, oh, that's for everybody else. That's not for me, right? You did not skip a beat when you were speaking to me now. And I suspect you didn't skip a beat as you evolved to where you are today. What was it for the listeners here that would really love to have that confidence, that self-esteem, that yearning, that I deserve this and I'm good enough? Help us understand how that evolved, where it came from.
I think where it came from was two things. One, understanding that there was something that was possible, that I saw something, I was like, oh, how did, like, those guys, they're not special. Like, there's nothing brilliant about that person. You meet a couple of senior executives, you've met millions of them, you're like, this isn't right. Like, this guy.
How'd they get there? Wait. I know the question to ask now. Who did your daddy play golf with? But go ahead.
Yeah.
I digress.
So I went to summer camp for the first. We could never afford to send me to summer camp. I went to summer camp, and with predominantly people, kind of who were significantly wealthier than we were. And I went there, and I just saw this range of people whose parents did these weird and wonderful things. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's really, and that's interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting. So the first thing was like, oh, it's possible. But the second thing was, what's possible wasn't the destination. I was never like, I want to do that because I want to make money, or I want to have a title, or I want to do this thing. Just as the comedy thing is such a great metaphor for it, because it's like, I never thought I want to be a comedian. I want to be on stage. It was always about, I want to pursue comedy. I'm interested and curious about the path of that. And how does one develop? I love comedy. How does one get up on stage and develop that? So it was always about the curiosity and chasing
That's the word. As you were speaking, I'm saying which is really a sign of emotional intelligence. You always listen with curiosity. How did that happen? How did they get there?
Yeah. And how does one do that? Like, what's the method to the madness?
So
I want to figure that out.
One of your parents, like you can be blue collar. I grew up very blue collar, was like, pie in the sky for me, right? But my mother was always reading, right? Yeah. She always had a curiosity. Like, you can't tell, but I'm pretty tiny. I'm like 5'1", right? And I never once felt doors were closed to me as an athlete because I was smaller, because I was a woman or a girl. It literally never crossed my mind. It's not like I was so, woohoo, woman, hear me roar. I was just like, I want to play basketball. I can't play basketball with Mary Janes. So I was the first girl on my block to wear sneakers. I didn't realize it was going to be the scandal that it was. Right. It was scandalous. And I'm like, well,
Barbara, did you hear?
Yeah.
Patty Ann got sneakers.
And they were the black con high tops with the white star. I mean, you couldn't miss them. You could.
Right.
But, and as I look back on that now, my parents, and at the time my father was still alive, although he died when I was very young, they were very ahead of their time. We grew up very conservative, very lower middle class, right? But there was a sense of, you can do whatever you want. Right?
Yeah.
So is that where it came from for you?
I think it was two things. I think on one hand, my mom was an incredible human being who, like, physically disabled, had spina bifida, wasn't supposed to live past 6 years old, ended up having 4 kids, but left. My dad left us when I was 1. We were on social assistance. Like, it was just in many ways, a really challenging existence for her. Stepdad comes in, raging alcoholic, blah, 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 blah. So on one hand, I saw this woman who had everything to be angry about in life, who was the most joyful, spirited person. The other thing was that she was so naive, like in terms of the world, because she would get this. This is how times have changed. Okay. The school my mom went to as a child was literally called the Montreal School for Crippled Children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they graduated in grade 10 because in their eyes, crippled kids aren't going to do anything.
Well,
we'll just get rid of them. Okay, grade 10. So she never went beyond that. She never really worked. She's lived a very closed life, only been on a plane, was on a plane like 3 times kind of thing. So on one hand, there was no expectation from her. It was just whatever makes you happy. She had no expectation whatsoever and couldn't even provide advice or guidance on anything, because she was just so naive with it. On the other hand, as wonderful as a human being as she was, it wasn't a great environment because of the alcoholism and stuff. So I was constantly like leaving the house to escape that. And so summer camp was just like, I'm getting away. I got to figure out a way to leave for the summer because I don't want to hang around this place. And so it was this ability to just go, and it was this constant leaving. Well, you got to go somewhere. So where the heck are you going to go? And it was just more like, I don't know where I'm going to go, but it was just this open curiosity of where I could go because anything was better than that.
Yeah, that is so incredible. And I feel, if I may say this, and you can slap me down if you disagree, it feels like, and I like for creative people I've worked with and coached, even when you were home, I would imagine you were gone. Because you got lost in your own, I got to make this better, right? And it's the yin and yang of life, right?
Yeah.
And there's something about that, and the resiliency of there's got to be a better way, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. Well, that's incredible.
Well, there was the comedy became, because you have these feelings inside, and comedy became a great outlet to like, oh, it's pure artistry. It's like, how do I express myself as a human being? But because my mom was this really positive, joyful person, it was like, but I can't be, I can't express myself in anger or through violence or anything like that. So it became this observer of my own life, like almost standing above it, looking down and finding the funny in that. And then how do you...
There's a lot of anger at the root of humor is anger. Yes, no?
There can be, I think I wrote a play once, and to take stand-up into play form, I worked with a dramaturge who said, you have to expose the emotional underbelly of the thing that informed the comedy. Mm-hmm. So that can be anger, it can be depression, it can be whatever, but there's a more serious emotion that has inspired you to go, well, what's funny about that? Well, what's the that? Like, what's the that you're really making fun of? It's not the situation. It's the other emotions that you're making.
Gosh, I'm going to have to play this back and remember that, because she said that much more eloquently than I did, right? You have to expose the underbelly of the emotion.
Yeah. That inspired the comedy, the humor.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've worked with actresses more than actors, and people don't realize how emotional it is. Like when I go to Broadway, I'm like, how do you do this? I mean, physically you can see it's exhausting, but emotionally it's exhausting. And sidebar, I feel like total amateur hour. One of the reasons why these Hollywood marriages don't work when they meet on set and they're playing a role is because, in fact, they are falling in love with each other really when they're in their role mode, even though they take it outside, and then enough time goes by and you're like, oh, wait, no, this isn't working. I don't know. What do you think? You probably see it more than me.
I think you need to be effective. You need to channel emotions, and one emotion leads to another emotion. You know, what I really found as I took the comedy into play form is that where comedy is most effective, I think, is that comedy can set up another emotion. So you make somebody laugh, and now you've got them in the emotional palm of your hand, and you can take them. So you can follow that. As soon as the punchline hits and they quiet down, if I deliver a really poignant point, they're like, oh. Or if I deliver something that's really serious, or if I deliver something that's insightful, if I've got their attention with the comedy, and then I go, well, based on that, doesn't this make sense? I'll give you an example. When I did the play, the very first time I did the play was something at Edmonton Fringe Festival.
The Coup? Is that the play you're referencing?
No, the play was called The Canadian Baby Bonus.
Okay, the Canadian Baby Bonus. Okay, we'll have to look that up.
Yes, it doesn't mean anything to your American audience, but the baby bonus was, it sounds so Canadian, that it was the federal government gave families a baby bonus that you got to check on, depending on the number of kids
like
you have.
Europe. France does that. Does that. I have 4 kids. I would be rich. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
Like we would get my mom. I think my mom got like $50 a kid every month. So we would have to wait for the baby bonus to come in to get clothes, because that's what clothed us and fed us.
So it's sort of like our Social Security insurance.
Yeah.
Right? Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So anyhow, so that was the play, the Canadian Baby Bonus. And I was delivering this performance, a one-man play. And at one point, it's funny. And then at one point, there's a callback to something earlier in the play. And the character says, so, hey, be careful. And the room is silent, and I'm performing it. And I said, so, hey, and this woman in the front row, all I heard was her go, ah. And she knew what the next line was going to be before I even said it. And I had her in the palm of my hand, because I knew if she was reacting in that way, I was like, ah. And I thought, I can take her anywhere right now. I can take her anywhere. If I want to deliver a joke, she's going to laugh uproariously. Mm-hmm. If I want to deliver, a meaningful line, she'll cry. Like, I could have taken her anywhere. And that was the moment I had on stage that fundamentally changed how I viewed comedy. And it's like I wanted to feel that emotion over and over and over. I got more joy out of the silence than I did out of the uproarious laughter.
And what was the line?
The line was, so, hey, be careful. And it's a callback to something earlier in the play that makes a lot more sense. And you're like, oh my God, this character has come full circle to now he's saying, be careful. And then the play kind of ends.
What you're saying is, I talk about communication all the time. And, it's so funny whenever I'm asked to do like a workshop or a keynote on communication. And even though you have your template, right, it's like, all right, what else can you possibly say about communication that people don't already know? All right, now we can throw in the online, the digital, the email, electronic, blah, blah, blah. But what I find, and even though we know this, the two things about all communication, and it's what you're saying about you have their attention. Like, I ask people, what's the main goal? They tell us all these things. No. It's to connect, right? You have their attention. Now you can tell them anything. And that can be used for good and, quite frankly, for evil. Evil.
For evil. Yeah, totally.
And so, words can change somebody's life. It can lift them up and it can destroy them. Yeah. And I think that's what you're describing.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
You're the writer. Okay. You have to, tell me, I'm taking a different direction here. I told you I was going to pivot.
Yeah.
Tell me sincerely, not your pat answer. See, I had to get Pat in there for you. Okay. Yeah. Your greatest failure that you really don't like to talk about. Because you've had so much success, and nobody is this successful without a wake of failures, right?
Yep. Yeah, there are a bunch of them. I mean, there's like really specific comedy nights that like, you don't want, that's a horrible.
That sucked.
when you did, like, you say a big punchline and all you hear in the crowd is, like it's dreadful. I would say my biggest failure was when I started the business.
The Church and State,
when it was called the Tite Group, because I was a creative director, right? I didn't have to run any business. I was the creative guy.
Yeah.
And so I've, like many creative directors, go like, I'm going to start my own thing. And speaking was kind of funding the business. And I had to hire a bunch of people because we wanted a big account. We want a big account. I now hire people. I'm kind of a year into it. And there's no speaking in the summertime. And I had just got married and I just bought a house and like honeymoon and blah, all that kind of stuff. Right. So we hit August. I'm tapped out. And the accountant comes to me and says, payroll's on Thursday. And I go, yeah. She said, there's no money in the account. And I said, we just billed $100,000. She's like, yeah, we billed it last week. We're not getting that for like 60 days. And I said, oh, is that cash flow? And she's like, yeah, it is. So I said, oh, okay. So I said, oh, like, what do we do? And she said, this is your business. You tell me what we're doing to make payroll. And I was like, oh. And then the very first employee I ever hired, Bridget Towler, was an amazing human being, came to me and she said, I heard your conversation with Lee. And she said, if you want to not pay me for a month or a couple of months, I've saved up money and you can just not pay me. And that was like the moment of, it's one thing to have like personal failures where you mess up and your life is impacted. But when your idiot behavior or lack of insight starts to affect other people, that's real failure. Mm-hmm. And that was the worst moment of my entrepreneurial life. Was like, here I was thinking I knew everything about it. And I had no idea what was going on. And I said to her, no, like, you're an employee. Like, your deal is you get a check every 2 weeks and you should not be questioning whether that check is going to show up. So unless you have equity, promise me you will never, ever say that again. And I went to the client and I said, I need you to courier me that check. It was the most embarrassing thing I've ever had to do. And I said, I'll make a deal with you. If you do it and I survive and I make payroll, I'm going to give up equity to bring in somebody who's more business focused, who can run the finances of this operation. It'll never happen again. And if it does happen again, you fire me. And so here I was, like a year into being a quote unquote business guy who was talking about business, who couldn't even manage cash flow.
Executive MBA program.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do it, but I led it. But I didn't even know about cash flow. Like, come on, that's an idiot. Like, that's 101, like 101.
Yeah, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So that
Tell
was
me more about Bridget. Hang on. Yeah. So why did you instill that? How did you instill that sense of loyalty? There's two things going on there. It's who she is and who you are. Right? So what was that dynamic about? Your first employee, you said. She's
my first employee.
So there's something, you're attracting that type of that doesn't just happen, Ron.
No, it was a really unique, like when you have your very first employee, when you start something, you're not hiring somebody. You are convincing somebody that they should take a risk to join you in what you want to do. And I had said, I've got these big plans, right? And this is what we're going to do. And I'm speaking. And what I needed as a first employee was I needed somebody who could do a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. I needed somebody who could be everything from an office manager to being a lead account person to having insight in social. Like, she needed to do everything, kind of start building the operations. And she was that kind of really well-rounded person great values, great personality. And she was like, okay, like her first day, she started on day one. I wasn't even there. I was on the road speaking. I didn't come back till 3 days later. And so I think she bought in.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just got to the point where, as we got bigger and bigger and bigger, at one point I had to say, you can't report to me anymore. And so it just changed where she wasn't helping Ron build something. It was now she needed a very specific role that reported into a president, and that fundamentally changed for her. And she was like, I think I need to, I'm like, yeah, I think this is a weird dynamic for you now.
Yeah. It's run its course. So did she leave?
Yeah, she left and she did other things, and we still chat, and I still have a ton of time for her. But she was in, like, she was fully invested.
That's an incredible story. I mean, that really is a testament to you and to her. But people people like Bridget don't just come into your life. I'm not woo-woo, I'm neuroscience, but your energy is attracting that type of person, right? Because we all know the people that we won't even ask the time of day because they won't give us the time of day, even though it doesn't cost them a dime, right? And then there's the people that genuinely want to help and will give you the shirt off their back, truly no strings attached.
Right.
So that was really that's a great story. That is, I think, it is interesting, right? Because we all have all right, your fellow Canadian, well, he's up in Canada now, although he actually is American. Dan Sullivan says we all have our unique ability, right?
Dan's office is right around the corner from my office.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Dan and
the strategic coach.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's right around the corner.
Okay. And so, your unique ability is the creative, right? You're not a business guy. So you just lucky for you, it was only the first year. Look at these geniuses on Wall Street. Companies are in the crapper, and you're like, where was your genius accountants, financial guys, Harvard MBAs? You had McKinsey in there and Boston Consult. Where are all these geniuses, right? So it happens to the best of whom they think is even the best of the best. So I think that's really poignant. And you're right. When we fail for ourselves, we don't learn or have to learn, it's one thing, but when it impacts other people. Yeah. Tell us, Ron, what floats your boat?
What does float my boat? Well, one, I'm old. I'm 53, but I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Second marriage?
No. First marriage.
No way.
Yeah. I got married very late. I got married 10 years, so we just celebrated our 10th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I got married when I was 43.
Why so late? Whoa, back up. Why so late? Guy, successful. I mean, you'd be a babe magnet.
I think it was, as I was exploring things, that curiosity, I don't know that I really found who I was through all of that. It was kind of like, I'm going to try on this shirt. 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 And all were kind of versions of something maybe that I thought I should be, but I think it was more about the external pursuit of something, and not like money and success, but it was just more about, I was deep into comedy, during those years, and deep into advertising. And I was just distracted by other things. And I met my wife. So, close to where you are, I met my wife. I had quit my job. I quit to start my own agency. I quit my own job. And when I released myself of those obligations and started to pursue the kind of a different kind of pursuit of defining this new thing, I went to see a friend in Philadelphia. I was like, long weekend going to Philadelphia. And then I took a train into Newark because there's an airport that there's an executive and kind of a small airline called Porter that runs from Newark into an island airport in Toronto. I sat beside my wife on that plane on the way home.
Who started the conversation?
Well, it was me.
You picking her up?
Yeah. Well, I thought she was stunningly beautiful.
That's a yes.
And this is, you want to hear my opening line?
Yes, I do.
Okay, this is my opening line. Let's picture it.
Comedian.
You're sitting beside.
And by the way, you met her because you were being more authentic to yourself. So you were, it's not a coincidence that you attracted somebody that was resonating with you then.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Go
ahead. Here's the line.
So we're flying from Newark to Toronto, and I said, brilliantly, romantically, so do you live in Toronto, or are you going to visit Toronto?
Oh, just stop the presses. What a genius. And she said, who are you?
She said, I live in Toronto. I said, oh, me too.
Me too.
And then we started talking, and she said, we were in advertising. Did you do an advertising degree or something? And I said, no, it's weird. I did a phys ed degree. And she said, where? And I said, Queens. And she said, so did I. So we went to the same school. She's 11 years younger.
Well, it was smart you didn't tell her right off you had just been unemployed, because the conversation would have been over.
Yeah. It would sound like a George Costanza moment, right? Yeah.
All
I'm
right, 40 years
old. I live with my parents.
You land, and now what? How do you get the number?
I realized that I asked, because I then knew where she went to school, and kind of, I guessed her age. And I said, oh, do you know this person? Do you know Abby Jones? And she said, yes, she's a very good friend of mine.
Now you're making connections.
Connection. So I sent Abby a Facebook message and said, hey, I met your friend Christy.
I thought only women did this.
No. I just sent the note and said, I thought she was beautiful and smart and seemed like a really great person. And that's it. That's all I said.
Is she dating?
No, I didn't even say that. I just said that. And then I got a Facebook friend request from Christy 2 days later. And then we went on a date, and
the rest is history. So,
and now we have two children.
I'm going to crack you up, because do you want to guess how I met my husband? A long time ago, though.
On a plane.
Back in the 70s, when New York was a disaster, I met him on the New York City train.
No way. Wow. Going into what station were you getting off at?
So my husband went to a school called the United States Merchant Marine Academy. It's Kings Point, and he sailed on super oil tankers. He was a captain of ships. And you had to go renew your license in downtown New York, which is pretty much the Wall Street district, to a place called the Seamen's Church.
Okay.
Million jokes could go on there. I got it. I hear it.
Yeah.
And he was going there. And long story, we started a conversation. It's a little complicated. We started a conversation, and he turned to me and he said, oh, I just missed my stop. And I said to him, oh, well, why didn't you get off? And I was naive. So why didn't you get off? He goes, well, we just started talking. And I said, he had just gotten back from being in Rio de Janeiro. Now, you know what happens in Rio de Janeiro. Yeah. Ship there, and he had 2 weeks off. So I said to him, you've been out in New York for too long. I said, what do you care? Just say you got to go. Little did I know. And at the time I was taking the train to NYU, and he has the line, oh, I'm thinking about getting my MBA there. Lie at the time, although he did end up. So I said, well, I know nothing about the business school. I've studied sciences my whole life. I said, but if you want, I can show you. Now, I grew up in a family where you respected military, you respected the police, right? So Merchant Marine Academy, you're in the military and you're in the Naval Reserve. So I thought it'd be safe that he got off the train with me.
Right.
He could have hacked me to death. Like, it was so dumb and naive. I was so picked up. I had no idea. So, it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
All right. So, what is unique about you that you really don't like to talk about because it's bragging, but you know full well it's contributed to where you are today in life, personally and professionally?
This is going to sound like, I think I'm a good guy. Like, I think, at the end of the day, we were always told, like, nice guys finish last. I don't believe in that. I think it's actually the opposite. I think that when you look at most industries, the people who've really, obviously there's always
the asshole. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always an asshole. But for the most part, like, you've dealt with actors, like the really, really famous, great actors, they're nice people. They're actually nice people. And
you know who's actually really nice people that separates them from the crowd, even though I'll make fun of like CEOs, corporate CEOs being like not nice. The really nice ones are really nice and they really care about people. You know, I think the bad ones get the press.
Yep. Yeah, the bad ones get the press, but I think you can. That doesn't mean you don't have to, you know, you have to still have to make tough calls. You still have to. There are people who probably don't think I'm a nice guy because they obviously disagree with my assessment of their ability and their talent. But you always try and, operate with complete candor and give people the proper feedback so it doesn't surprise them and all that kind of stuff. But I think I just, I think that's a good direction in life. I don't think it's weak. I think it's a sign of strength to be able to remember to treat people with respect and to be nice about. I mean, it's so lamey Canadian, but
but common sense too is the least common of all our senses, right?
Yeah.
All right. So you have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at 53.
Yeah.
So the beauty about having children when we're mature is that we're not distracted or impressed by all the noise. And you know what I mean by that. So other than the standard, I just want them to be happy. What do you want for them when they grow up?
I'm concerned with a couple of things. I'm concerned. So I, grew up with no money, and now we're living very comfortably. It's, and they have privilege and they have benefits that 99.9% of the population just does not have. And I hope that doesn't get in the way of them, genuinely appreciating what they do have and how they're very lucky to have all they have, and that it doesn't get in the way of them. I hope it doesn't place expectations on them that they will duplicate that they will duplicate the outcome. It's the Neil Pasricha has a great kind of insight about happiness, and it's the in his book The Happiness Equation, where the traditional thing is like, if we work hard and we succeed, then we will be happy, opposed to if we're happy, it means we can work hard and then success will come. And so I hope they don't have expectations about there's some, people with way more money than we have and stuff around them, but people who have backgrounds and access to stuff that I didn't have that as a kid. It's a weird world.
You'll be able to influence a lot of that.
I think so.
A lot. Not all. Like if you ever heard Mark Cuban talk, whether you like him or not, he talks a lot about.
Yeah, I like Mark. Yeah.
He is adamant that he does not want his children to, and when I tell people all the time is most people that I work with are very wealthy. I'm like, look, you tell your children it's your money, not theirs.
Yeah.
The number one way to kill kids and ambition is to tell them they're inheriting money.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It's crazy, right? And it's also part of, because I work with generational families, right? That's why it takes 3 generations where a very successful family business is burned to the ground, right? Great. You know all that. Okay.
First generation starts it. Second generation scales it. Third generation screws it up.
Expects it. Right.
Right. Yeah. Expects it. Yeah.
Expects it. They never knew anything different, where the second generation saw their parents work their butt off.
Yeah.
So, right. And whereas the third is like, where are we going for February vacation? Going in March. Yeah. I want a Louis Vuitton, like you're 10 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for your time. I could talk to you all day. Just have a couple of more questions, and then I'm going to force you to brag, which I know you won't, but I'm going to try. What's the last book you reread and why?
Reread? The last book I reread was probably A Prayer for Owen Meany.
That was a great book.
It's a John Irving book, right? And
that was a great book.
I really love. I see here, stacks right there.
Oh, do you have coming up for air over there? Oh no.
So this is Joey Coleman's new book. That's next on the pile.
Okay.
and Joe Moll's Loyalty is beneath that. And so
you read, you don't do the audiobooks? You don't do the audiobooks?
No, I'll do sometimes. We go to we have a summer place on a lake. So
the place
right
I know
now
that's
we're
the summer
listening.
place in Canada is Saskatchewan. Is that what it's called?
Saskatchewan?
Saskatchewan. Yeah, that's the summer place all night.
Yeah, no, that's hours away. No, okay. It's kind of the what's the place if you're in Manhattan? What's the place you go to?
The Hamptons?
The Hamptons. So we have a place that's kind of the Hamptons of Toronto.
Okay.
It's north of the city by 2 hours.
I'm in the blue collar Hamptons. That's at the Jersey Shore.
Yeah. So we're listening to Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. We're listening to that now.
Yeah.
And so I've always got a couple on the go.
Okay. And so what do you like about the book? Why are you reading it again?
I read it again because I read it like at a time in my life, and I wanted to kind of revisit. Like, does it stand up? Does it hold up? Does it hold up through all these years? Was it as good as what it was? And there was also the character is just such a really interesting character, Owen Meany. And I wanted to like go back and just get that character's perspective on stuff. It was less about the story, and I was like, it holds up. It totally holds up.
Well, what's interesting about reading a book another time is when you like who you are in an hour is different than who you are during this interview, right? So your perspective will be so different. So you read a book at a different stage in your life. Yeah. It resonates differently. Not better, not worse, just different, right?
Yeah, totally.
All right, this question you're going to love. You're going to love this question as a creative. What's the one song you can't live without?
Oh, wow. That is good. The one song I can't live without. Probably. So occasionally, it's not something that I listen to as like a personal favorite, but my mom passed away. My mom was like a big country music fan.
Oh,
I think
really?
she only flew, I think 2 or 3 times in her life. And one of the times was to Nashville. And she was like old school country, like Tammy Wynette, George Jones kind of thing. And there was a George Jones song called Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes? And it's about yeah, right. It's about the old country singers and who's going to be the next generation to fill their shoes. And we played that at my mom's funeral. And so that song to me brings back not only my mom, but, when my dad left, like all my mom's siblings and their families completely stepped in to help raise us. And that my mom's side of the family, like it's that generation of people, and some have died and not all, but
that's where you learned your values, by the way.
Yeah.
That's why you told Bridget you take your paycheck, because that's what you do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's that generation that really fundamentally, I think, us, doing family stuff in our grandfather's basement. And it was just that generational thing of like, who's going to do that for the next generation? So that song, I think, even though I don't listen to that, but when I do, I purposefully listen to it to channel those memories and to think of my mom.
And if I may, if you pull that into your thought of your children and their privilege and staying grounded, that's what will help them.
Yeah, you're right.
That's what
you're right.
Okay.
I think I got to play them the song tonight now.
And they'll probably roll their eyes, although they're still young. So they probably still think you know everything, right?
Well, so here's the thing, just very quickly. Because, my dad wasn't around, I hug and kiss my children like 4 million times a day, just like, like always, top of the head, And my son, Max, said to me at one point, he's like, why do you kiss us so much? And I said, I never got a kiss from my dad. Not once in my life did I ever get a kiss from my dad. And so daddy just wants to make sure that you know how much I love you. That's why I do it. 3 days goes by. 3 days. We're in the car. All four of us. He's in the back kid seat. We get to a stoplight, silence in the car, and I just hear this little voice say, "Why didn't your daddy kiss you?" And it had been in his brain for 3 days, and he couldn't figure it out. And it was so beautiful.
Poignant. Yeah.
And poignant in that, like, oh, it's like he couldn't even contemplate how a daddy wouldn't do, like, what are you kidding me? And that was like, oh, this is working.
What'd you tell him?
Way. My wife gave me that look of like, all right, let's see how you handle this one.
Good
and so I just said, well, there are two. Daddy's dad wasn't around a lot. And so I didn't get to see him. But also, daddies in that time, they didn't really kiss their kids. Like that wasn't what they did. And we've become better at showing that emotion. But it just wasn't something that daddies did in those days.
So wait for the next question. Why didn't they do that, Daddy?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly.
All right, Ron, I want you to now unabashedly promote yourself. Anything you would like people to see, to purchase, how they can find out more about you? Because really, this is such a refreshing interview. It's the creatives. There's just such an energy to you that everybody can learn from you.
Well, I exist in book form. My latest book is called Think, Do, Say. And that is available wherever you get your books.
Do you have a preference for where you'd like them to go purchase it?
Whatever is best for if they like audio or like whatever it is. And then you can check out my website. It's rontite.com. You can check out churchstate.com for the agency, or you can just Google Ron. There's really just one of, I don't know of any other.
Goodness.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I write a lot of stuff on LinkedIn.
Oh, good. Then maybe you'll accept my invite that I just sent you.
I will most certainly do. Yeah.
I'm teasing.
But that's where I keep a constant flow of writing instead of a blog or Medium or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today. There's so much information that you shared that was so practical, so poignant, so powerful. So I really want to thank you for being a guest today.
Oh, thanks for having me. And thanks to everybody out there for listening.